Next on Animator Talk, we're discussing a more mature animated feature intended for a more mature audience while still keeping it friendly for kids. Today we're discussing The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Coming up. Hey animation fans, Animator Talk here to celebrate the art of animation and its contribution to entertainment of yesterday, today, and into the future. Now, let me preface this episode with the declaration that I love this film. That's right, I love The Hunchback of Notre Dame. You could consider my Catholic background, my affinity for complex musical themes, or the fact that I was in my early 20s when this film was released. But I think the strongest case I have for the beauty of this film is its superb animation and breathtaking visuals. You see, like most animation enthusiasts, well, perhaps you, I watch these films very differently from the general audience. I don't only watch the story and listen to the music, I dissect these films like a detective combs through a crime scene.
I want everyone out of this room! Everyone now!
You heard him, everyone out, come on!
I nerd out to films like this. Anyone with a discerning eye for the details would likely be right there with me. Now, the origin of this film began in 1993, when the development executive David Staten had the idea to transpose the Victor Hugo story into an animated feature. It wasn't an obvious story by any means, and came with many challenges. The story involved lots of elements you wouldn't expect from a Disney film. It's set in France during the Gothic period. It involved a character who was developmentally disabled, and prejudice toward he and the Romani culture, which kept everyone in hiding from persecution. The themes of violence shown in this film can get a little intense for younger viewers, so it was a little confusing that the majority of the merchandising at the time was geared toward the kids rather than the animation geeks like me.
All right, pour the wine and cut the cheese.
Now, the novel the film is based on is quite dark, set in the late 1400s Paris, France. Hugo wrote the novel at the time when France was attempting to dismantle much of the old French Gothic architecture in hopes of reinventing the landscape. His novel was written as an effort to preserve and restore the interest in those Gothic structures in the city. In order to begin writing a treatment for this film, many modifications would be needed. For one, certain elements involving genocide, infanticide, and on-screen violence would need to be toned way, way down. Stop! As were the elements of the main antagonist coveting the film's heroine. Yeah. But the one element that took a complete 180 is the fact that our heroes actually survived this adaptation. Oh, spoiler alert, the heroes survive a Disney film. I think that was safe to divulge. Kirk Wise once said, "We weren't going to end it the way the book ended, with everybody dead." Oh, I did it again. Spoiler alert. Forget that one. Come on, you weren't going to read that novel anyway, were you?
No, you silly boy.
Directors Kirk Wise and Gary Trousdale, fresh off the success of Beauty and the Beast, geared up for their next film. It was called A Song of the Sea. It was a tale about the Greek god Orpheus. The film was in the middle of story development, having some trouble, when Jeffrey Katzenberg called them into his office, informing them he was pulling the plug on their project, and then placed them at the helm of Hunchback. During an interview in 2002, Gary had shared that they were immediately intrigued, saying he felt it had a great deal of potential. It had great memorable characters, a really terrific setting, and the potential for fantastic visuals and a lot of emotion. Production was in full swing by the summer of '93. In the fall, the crew had headed out to Paris for their research trip. They took extensive tours of the city and intensive tours of Notre Dame itself. They were guided on private tours of areas of the cathedral, touring stairwells, towers, and rooms not seen by the general public. They were photographing and documenting everything. They even toured the Hall of Justice and the catacombs under the city, as well as the actual location of the actual Court of Miracles.
Well, what have we here?
How I would have loved to have been on that trip. I would later get to tour Notre Dame while in Paris myself with my wife on our honeymoon. She was thrilled to accompany me in the cathedral, but didn't really grasp my sense of awe until we returned home and watched the film together. It was then when she realized the accuracy in the film's attention to detail. Tab Murphy was brought on to write the screenplay. Not only was it his job to tone down the many darker elements of the film, but it was also he who decided to make Quasimodo romantically interested in Esmeralda, as opposed to the original story where he acts as a matchmaker between Esmeralda and Phoebus. It brought in more emotion and a reality to the story that really anybody could relate to at some point in their lives. Another change that was necessary to avoid controversy was to change Frollo's occupation from clergyman to a judge. His evil misdeeds and infatuation with Esmeralda was more palatable once Frollo was no longer a man of the cloth.
Minister Frollo learned years ago to respect the sanctity of the church.
Now, the novel depicts Quasimodo sharing conversation with the many statues and gargoyles of the cathedral. It was written in such a way to drive home his living in loneliness in the towers. It was decided that in order to have dialogue throughout the film and to bring some levity between such dramatic scenes, Quasi should have some friends to converse with. It was only natural to bring some of these gargoyles to life while leaving their actual involvement in the film ambiguous and up to the viewer's own interpretation.
Go scare a nun.
It was obvious that the gargoyles were the avenue to bring in the younger audience. They needed to be front and center through much of the story. It was originally decided to name them Lawton, Chaney, and Quinn after the actors who've portrayed Quasimodo in films past. Disney Legal proposed the states of the actors may have problems with using their names. So it was decided that the names of the two males be named Victor and Hugo after the author, and the female Laverne after one of the Andrews sisters. Now, casting on this film went very much like most. The search for big names for marquee value always sounds good at first, until the star comes in to read and discovers, well, voiceover isn't quite as easy as they supposed it was. One way this casting call would discern itself from the others was when actor Mandy Patinkin was called in to read for Quasimodo. It was said he was so difficult to work with and his demands weren't being met. He even brought in his own composer who rearranged the song Out There to meet the talent restrictions. Once he fought with the producers and the composers walked out of his audition, he decided to step aside, claiming, "I can't do this." To this day at the studio, the scene is known as the Patinkin Incident.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
Tom Hulce was then approached, admiring his stage acting and especially his portrayal of Mozart in the film Amadeus. He was thrilled to participate, admitting he knew nothing of the process and marveled how the real acting was done by the animators.
It's a map.
What are you talking about?
See, here's the cathedral and the river and this little stone.
I've never seen a map that looks like...
Kevin Kline was brought in for his heroic tenor for the role of Phoebus.
I thought the actors came in and they saw the finished animation and they just gave it voices. But when I found out that it was just the contrary, that the voices often animated the animation. I'd never played a character like this and I'd never been a voice for a character like this.
Looking for a heroine that sets herself apart from the typical voices in Disney's library, they were looking for an actress with a little more texture to her voice. They found it in Demi Moore.
And the more I see and the more I've done, the more I think I start to meld with the character. It's been a great challenge. It's been really fun.
British actor Tony Jay was favored by the directors for the role of the villain after working with him in Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, that is despicable. I love it.
His deep glottal fry was just what they wanted for the role of Judge Claude Frollo. Or as he would call it,
You are making your bid for immortality. You are in a movie by Disney.
David Ogden Stiers was another holdover from their days on Beauty and the Beast.
Anything we can do to make your stay more comfortable?
Stiers was proving to be an actor who took well to voiceover and cast him as the Archdeacon.
The very eyes of Notre.
While looking for casting of the role of the gypsy Clopin, they found Broadway performer Paul Candel.
Up there, high in the dark bell tower, lives the mysterious bell ringer.
Once you listen to his performance, singing in the film's opening number, The Bells of Notre Dame, it's clear to see why he was cast. When casting the roles for the gargoyles, Charles Kimbrough of TV's Murphy Brown was the first cast as the stiff, uptight gargoyle Victor.
It is a treat to watch the colorful pageantry of the simple peasant folk.
He admitted he was less than thrilled to take on the project, not loving that the novel was being interpreted into animation, until he learned the amount of care and research that was going into the development. Seinfeld's Jason Alexander's dream of voicing a Disney film was finally realized when he was cast as the wisecracking gargoyle Hugo.
Who says you gotta ask?
Oh, no.
Yes, sneak out.
It's just one afternoon.
I couldn't.
And yes, sneak back in.
You'll never know you were gone.
The older and wiser female gargoyle was voiced to perfection by Disney favorite Mary Wicks.
So, Mary Clarence, you think you can do better? I believe I'd like to see that.
This would prove to be her last role, as she would pass away during production. Bringing these characters to life, the task of casting talented animators who can really give this film the quality it requires was no easy feat. Especially seeing Glenn Keane and Andreas Deja were tied up on other projects. They were able to collect an incredibly talented group that really pulled this off. James Baxter had been in the studio for years, but he had really proven himself as the supervising animator of Belle in Beauty and the Beast. However, in my opinion, he really shined as the animator who brought Quasimodo to life.
It will be fun. The jugglers and music and dancing.
Not only did he successfully animate a character with physical handicaps in a very realistic way, but Quasimodo was animated with such raw emotion. You'd have to be carved from stone not to feel for him in this film. Tony Fuccelli was tasked to bring Esmeralda to life. You'd be hard-pressed to find a more realistically animated and endearing heroine than this one.
So there's 10 of you and 1 of me. What's a poor girl to do?
Russ Edmonds was tasked in animating Phoebus.
You were saying?
Disney heroes in the past have come off quite stiff and forgettable. However, Edmonds really animated a likable hero without diminishing Quasimodo's role in the film.
Oh, dear, I'm sorry. Naughty horse. Naughty. He's just impossible. Really, I can't take him anywhere.
Animation favorites Will Finn, who would animate Laverne, and David Perwixma, who would animate both Victor and Hugo. Together, these two would bring the comedy in between all of that heavy drama. And Kathy Zielinski would take my breath away with her animation of the villainous Frollo. The attention to detail on this character would fall apart in the hands of inexperienced animators. But Zielinski would flex her strong animation muscle to absolute perfection in this role.
Mark my words, Gypsy, you will pay for this insolence.
I mean, just look at this work. Frollo was arguably the most complex animated character in the history of animation. And animation dynamo Mike Surrey would steal scenes left and right with his complexity and emotional expressiveness in the animation of his character Clopin. I am always at awe with how his pencil strokes can evoke such attitude with grace. Every film gives me a favorite character that I study more than others, and with this film, it's definitely Clopin. Amazing work here. And then there's the music. Oh, that music. Alan Menken does it again, teaming alongside Stephen Schwartz for the second time after Pocahontas. They really brought their A-game on this film. The soundtrack has got to be Disney's biggest, most epic work in the company's history. With 8 new songs and an incredibly rich score, this film is wall-to-wall ear candy. When setting up the film's prelude, it was thought to be very dialogue-heavy. Finding the subject matter that heavy, the producers felt it was better to showcase the introduction through song. Schwartz and Menken got to work immediately on The Bells of Notre Dame.
Morning in Paris, the city awakes to the bells of Notre Dame.
Beginning with a very traditional Latin mass sound in their chorus that would sing underneath the remaining dialogue and those incredible visuals to get this film rolling.
Take them from her.
She ran. Now, here is a riddle to guess if you can sing the...
I argue you will never find a more dramatically engaging introduction than the one in this film. This film's I Want song, Out There, would prove just as sweeping and as beautiful as Part of Your World. Telling of his desire to be among those in the streets below him, but aware of the prejudice they'd feel toward him, is both awe-inspiring as well as heartbreaking.
And up there, living in the sun.
God help the outcasts, hungry from birth.
God Help the Outcasts would prove to be a challenge as well, as Demi Moore would attempt to perform it, but warned them ahead of time that they should find a singing double. They would end up doing just that in finding Heidi Mollenhauer to fill in the singing in her stead.
I ask for nothing, I can get by.
The song would enforce the theme of prejudice while praying for divine intervention. The villain's song, Hellfire, would be Disney's most controversial song yet. Frollo singing of his desire for the attention of one of the very people he was persecuting, fantasizing of being with her physically, was quite the moral stretch for a Disney feature animation film. But they were able to do it so artistically that any innuendo would surely go over the heads of the youngest in the audience. The other songs, A Guy Like You and Topsy Turvy, fill out the soundtrack with a lighter fare, bringing some fun and levity between the weight of this film.
Once a year we throw a party here in town. Once a year we turn all parties upside down.
Oh hey, did you know?
Check it out!
Cyndi the Gargoyle. The first voiceover role cast in this film was that of the gargoyle Quinn. 80s pop star Cyndi Lauper was cast for her fun, bubbly personality and a possible song number. Rewrites and development would alter the characteristics of this gargoyle over time. Once Quinn became Laverne, it was believed she was too young to play the older sage, and the character was sadly recast. A Horse with No Name. Phoebus's horse wasn't named in the film script. He was given his name in an ad-lib Kevin Kline provided when he called to his horse.
Come on, boy. Achilles, heel.
And speaking of horse names, Frollo's red-eyed, black-haired steed is aptly named Snowball. A nod to Mickey Mouse. When Clopin animator Mike Surrey got his recording of the Court of Miracles song, he noted a similarity in the rhythm to Fantasia's Sorcerer's Apprentice. As a nod to the Fantasia sequence, Clopin lifts the front of his robe while dancing, just like Mickey Mouse did in Fantasia. The Hunchback of Notre Dame would end up grossing over $325 million worldwide at the box office, outperforming the previous film, Pocahontas. It would take home the Oscar for Best Music in a Musical or Comedy Score, the Annie for Best Animated Feature, Best Directing for an Animated Feature, and Best Music. It took the Golden Globe for Best Score and the Saturn Award for the Best Fantasy Film. This film was a well-written, well-directed, visually stunning animated feature with lots of heart, beautiful music, and dramatic efforts that will forever be sealed in my memory as a triumph in fantastic animation. But more than anything else, its message of inclusivity, to fight prejudice, and to understand, to stand up for others and their freedoms are something to take into our real world today.
3 cheers for Quasimodo!
Until next time, keep moving forward.